So suspicious activity reports. Member firms, including all financial institutions under the USA Patriot Act, are required to establish and implement policies and procedures that can be reasonably expected to detect and cause reporting of suspicious activities, and requires the filing of suspicious activity reports. Anytime there is financial behavior that is commercially illogical and serves no apparent purpose, including but not limited to opening up an account for a new client who's uninterested in products that may offer better returns, the client's unconcerned about suitability, they have no clear investment objective, they have no concern about the amount of commission charged. That's a client you want, right? No, of course not, but these are things you're looking out for. These are kind of the red flags. Suspicion has been raised. If they conduct multiple transactions for less than $10,000, because they know currency transaction reports are filed if it's over $10,000, so they're kind of trying to stay under the radar, if you will. That's suspicious. If they make unusual wire transfers to foreign countries, or if the customer supplies inadequate or false information. So some of the cases that I've read where people were found through the filing of a suspicious activity report to have actually been engaging in illegal activities were when people were providing fake phone numbers, so cell phone numbers that never did work. So those are the things that you're looking for. If your customer just doesn't care about commission, doesn't have an investment objective, does a lot of little transactions, or you can't get hold of them ever, file the suspicious activity report. So just use your common sense with those. You can do those. Section 326 is verification of identification. So the USA Patriot Act says if your customer's opening up a new account, you need to know who they are. So it's a very specific rule as far as what we call all financial institutions must have what are called customer identification programs. So under the USA Patriot Act, we introduce the Customer Identification Program. So financial institutions must have written customer identification programs that are designed to verify the identity of each customer who's going to open up an account. The CIP program must be appropriate for the firm's size and business, must be part of the firm's anti-money laundering compliance program, and at a minimum must contain procedures to verify the identity of any person seeking to open up an account to the extent reasonable and practical, maintain records of the information used to verify a person's identity. They must look to determine whether the person appears on any list of known or suspected terrorists or terrorist organizations provided to broker-dealers by any government agency. And the customer identification program must provide customers with notice that their broker-dealer is requesting information to verify their identity. So it's usually part of the paperwork that says, look, we have to do this. This is what we're going to ask you for in order to open up this account for you. The minimum identifying information that must be obtained from each customer prior to opening an account under the CIP rules: the customer's name, the date of birth for an individual, and address, which for an individual will be a residential or business street address. If the individual does not have a residential or business street address, it could be, if they're in the armed forces, an APO or FPO box number. It could be the residential or business street address of next of kin or another contact individual. If the customer is a person other than an individual, such as a corporation, a partnership, or a trust, there must be an address that is a principal place of business, a local office, or other physical location. Prior to opening up the account, The member firm must also get from this person, individual or company, an identification number, which would be their tax ID, their social security number. If they're a non-US person, one or more of the following: a taxpayer ID, their passport number and country of issuance, or an alien identification number, or the number and country of issuance of any other government-issued document evidencing nationality or residence and bearing a photograph or similar safeguard. Notice regarding these procedures must occur before the account is opened. So it's part of the paperwork. So it says, hey, by the way, so that someone doesn't freak out when you ask for a copy of their Social Security card, we have to ask for these things. We're required by law. So by law, under the USA Patriot Act, the Customer Identification Program rules require us. You have to give them notice, though. So notice is adequate if the broker-dealer generally describes the identification requirements of this rule and provides such notice in a manner reasonably designed to ensure that the customer is able to view the notice or otherwise is given the notice prior to opening the account. Sometimes broker-dealers post a notice in the lobby, or they have the notice on the website, or it's part of the account application process. So this is just a sample of what this notice must say. So maybe it's just on the wall in the office of the broker-dealer. Important notice about procedures for opening a new account. So this is just a sample notice. To help the government fight the funding of terrorism and money laundering activities, federal law requires all financial institutions to obtain, verify, and record information that identifies each person who opens an account. What this means for you: when you open an account, we will ask for your name, address, date of birth, and other information that will allow us to identify you. We may also ask to see your driver's license or other identifying documents. So they don't necessarily have to see someone's Social Security card. They need their Social Security number. It just depends upon the firm's rules. So we had Bank Secrecy Act. We had USA Patriot Act. We learned about currency transaction reports, suspicious activity reports, and the Customer Identification Program. Lots of rules. It's a chapter of rules. What's next? SEC Regulation S-P. SEC Reg SP. This has to do with privacy. So what this is the financial industry's adoption of the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act. It all has to do with protecting non-public personal information of consumers and customers. Under Regulation S-P, broker-dealers may not share non-public personal information of customers with non-affiliated third parties, unless the broker-dealer provides notice of its privacy policies and practices, the broker-dealer provides customers the ability to opt out of the sharing, the customers do not elect to opt out. So they can share your information if you don't opt out, which is kind of interesting. So you opt out, and if you don't, then they can. If a customer requests to opt out, that must be honored as soon as reasonably possible. When do you have to give out the privacy notice? When someone becomes a customer. They must be given an initial privacy notice no later than the time a customer relationship is established. So initial notice when customer relationship is established, which is usually when they open up the account in the beginning. I suppose if the broker-dealer was also an investment advisor, it could be the first meeting that they have where they talk about what ideas they have for the customer's assets. So initial notice, and then annually. An annual privacy notice must be given to all customers. The annual privacy notice may be included within a prospectus or within an annual report to shareholders. If there is a joint account, broker-dealers are not required to provide more than one privacy notice. Regulation S-P also requires broker-dealers establish safeguards to protect the security and confidentiality of customer records and information so that it doesn't get hacked into, hopefully. SEC Rule 17A-8 requires every broker-dealer who is subject to the Currency and Foreign Transaction Reporting Act of 1970 to comply with the record retention requirement of the Code of Federal Regulations. If federal law requires the same record to be kept for different periods of time, the record should be kept for whatever rule is, what do you think, shortest or longest? What do you think? Longest. So anytime there's contradictory federal regulations, always keep the records for longer. I have tax returns for like my whole life because I'm a weird person like that. FINRA Rule 2267 is the Investor Education and Protection Rule. This rule has to do with what is called broker check. So this is getting much more publicity in the past few months, past year. So the actual rule itself requires each member that carries customer accounts or holds customers' funds and securities to once every calendar year provide in writing, which may be electronic, to each customer the following items of information. So every calendar year, broker-dealers must provide the customer with FINRA's broker check hotline number, the FINRA website address, and a statement as to the availability to the customer of an investor brochure that includes information describing FINRA broker check. If you were to go to finra.org, if you haven't, go. It's actually a really pretty good user-friendly website. Right there on the home page, at least currently for FINRA, in the corner, upper right-hand corner, is the broker check program. So you can look up anyone involved in this industry. So this is just saying, hey, look, all firms are required to tell their customers that there is a phone number they can call, which, I mean, I guess some people probably still do that, but I don't make phone calls hardly ever anymore. Here's the website address for FINRA. It's finra.org, and they can ask for a brochure describing the program. So it's a really great program. I can't tell you how many times I've read a story about, the client got taken advantage of by someone who pretended to be a registered representative. Customers have the ability to look up currently registered and previously registered persons within the broker check program. They have the ability to look up member firms. So there's lots of information available to customers if they'd only look. So this is the rule that says, as a firm, we must remind customers of this program when? Every calendar year in writing. If the member whose contract with customers is only introducing, so there's introducing broker-dealers who don't actually hold customers' money or securities, they can furnish a customer with the information about the broker check program at or prior to the time of the customer's initial purchase, and they don't have to do it every year. The clearing member firm would have to do it every year. So broker check is free. There's all sorts of information. Now, exactly what's in the broker check program, what information is in there, that's described in another rule entirely. And the FINRA website is just a wonderful source of information for anyone. So check it out if you haven't yet already. And no, FINRA didn't pay me to endorse that, but it really is a good website. Designation of accounts is FINRA Rule 3250. It says that no member firm can carry an account on its books in the name of a person other than that of a customer, which would make sense, except that an account may be designated by a number or a symbol. That always makes me think of Prince when he had that funny symbol instead of his name. Does he still? I don't even know. I don't think he does anymore. So an account can be designated by a number or symbol so long as the member has a file with the written statement signed by the customer attesting to the ownership of such account. So it's fine to designate an account by number or symbol as long as there is written notification as to the customer says, that symbol belongs to me, Prince. Discretionary accounts is covered in NASD Rule 2510. This is the rule that says no excessive trading. So discretionary authority is when the client gives you the ability to choose what type of security to purchase, what price you do the transaction at. It's this ability to trade in the best interest of your customer. The concern is you shouldn't be trading over and over and over and over and over to generate commissions. That's prohibited. It's called churning. And you shouldn't be trading in excessive amounts to generate commission. Also, another way to define churning. So you as a registered rep cannot exercise discretion over type and or quantity without discretionary power, which is a written trading authorization. It must be given to you before you exercise discretion. And then really the principal has to sign off on the discretionary account. Each discretionary order on the order ticket must be marked discretion. So if the customer called you up and said, I want to buy 1,000 shares of Under Armour stock, for example, and they've told you type and quantity, they automatically give you discretion over timing and price. So anytime you, the registered rep, have the ability to choose type and or quantity, you need written discretionary authority from your customer. So prior to exercising discretion, principals shall promptly in writing approve each discretionary order and review all discretionary accounts, principals, at a frequent interval to make sure that there is no excessive trading in size or frequency. So no churning. So if you have the ability to choose, once again, type or quantity, that requires discretionary authority. You do not need written discretion to choose timing or price. It kind of goes back to the idea of market orders must be executed fully and promptly. Member firms must execute market orders fully and promptly, right away, whatever price the market will bear. SEC rules pertaining to accounts, records, and reports of member firms. So this is where we get into some definitions of what records must be maintained, and we learn how long, some dates, how long to keep the records. So this rule requires that blotters, ledgers, and other records of original entry reflect all receipts and disbursements of cash, all purchases and sales of securities, and all receipts and deliveries of securities. So what's a blotter? It's a record of original entry. Broker-dealers maintain blotters relating to the purchase and sale of securities, the receipt and delivery of securities, and the receipt and disbursement of cash. So remember, lots of dates in here. So I apologize, I don't write the test. So blotters must be prepared to reflect transactions as of the trade date, which would make sense, and must be prepared no later than the following business day. So prepared business day after the trade, or sooner. Prepared business day after the trade. General ledger. I used to work in general ledger at Motorola in a previous life. So the general ledger is an accounting record of the broker-dealer's financial health. It includes their assets, liabilities, their net worth. It's the financial statements. It's where we prepare. I'm an accountant. So the firm's general ledger must be kept current as to ensure compliance with the firm's net capital requirements. So net capital is not a huge subject on your test, but when you do 26, I'll teach you all about that. So the general ledger must be updated at minimum of monthly. I bet you they do it every day. But the general ledger must be updated at minimum monthly. I suppose it depends on how big the firm is, how frequently they're doing that, but no less frequently than monthly. A stock record shows all of the securities held by the broker-dealer, including ownership and location of the securities. The stock record must be posted no later than the business day after settlement. So the business day after settlement. So that's different than the blotter. The blotter is the day after the trade. Settlement's either T+3 or T+5, depending. So stock record posted no later than business day after settlement, which makes sense. You don't want to post it into this record until after settlement. Customer ledgers are customer statements. The customer's margin account and cash account ledgers must be kept separate. You can't mix those together. Customer ledgers must be posted no later than settlement date. So customer ledgers, settlement date. So the day they pay is the day that that security belongs on their customer ledger. So that makes sense too. So thankfully, a lot of these do have some common sense behind them. These items of what we call original entry must be kept, all of them, for 6 years. The first 2 years readily accessible, which generally means in the member firm's office. Readily accessible for the first 2 years. What else do they want us to know? All these dates. So items of original entry, 6 years kept by the member firm, 2 years readily accessible. Order tickets, which we're going to talk about here in just a second detail. Order tickets. The order ticket must be prepared at the time of the transaction. It's what makes the transaction happen, the order ticket. Confirmations. Those must be prepared and sent no later than the business day after the trade date. Business day after the trade date. So next day, next business day. Account records should be prepared prior to the transaction. So if the customer's selling, we know where the securities are. If they're buying, we know where the money is. So account records prepared prior to the transaction. Now, there's different rules as far as we talked about under the USA Patriot Act, the customer identification program, and what you had to look at to open up the account. Now we have, within SEC rules, information that broker-dealers must have within the customer account records. And they're not always the exact same information, so just kind of be careful here. So this is under the SEC rules. Broker-dealers must ensure that for each account with the natural person as a customer or owner, there is a record indicating the customer or owner's name, tax ID number, address, telephone number, date of birth, employment status, including occupation and whether the customer is an associated person of a member, broker, or dealer. So that goes back to just making sure if they're opening up an account and they're already an account associated person with another member firm, you need to know that. Customer account records include the customer's annual income, their net worth excluding the value of their primary residence, what's the account's investment objectives, an indication of whether the record has been signed by the associated person responsible for the account, if any, and approved or accepted by a principal of the firm. So that's the person with their 26 or 24 license, depending upon what kind of firm it is. So principals must accept all new accounts. If the account is a discretionary account, there must be the dated signature of each customer or owner granting the authority and the dated signature of each natural person to whom discretionary authority was granted. So there's a totally separate rule about customer account information called FINRA Rule 4512. That rule requires that included within the customer account information is the name of the associated person, if any, responsible for the account. This SEC Rule 17A-3 requires their signature. The FINRA rule really, to me, makes more sense. If you were to look at my signature, you would have no idea what my name was. So the SEC rule, it's kind of old-fashioned that we require the registered rep's signature. The FINRA rule is more updated, and that's true. It's a more recently changed rule that requires the registered representative's name. Both FINRA and the SEC rule require the principal's signature, who accepted the account. If the account is a joint account, the account record information must include personal information for each joint owner who is a natural person. However, financial information for the individual joint owners may be combined. So if it's Susie and Bruce, husband and wife, it's our net worth. So that can be combined. The account record requirement does not apply to an account where the account is owned by the trustees of a trust. It would apply to UGMA, UTMA accounts, IRA accounts, qualified plans. Broker-dealers must keep customer account records. Customer account records for 6 years, from the time information was changed or 6 years from the time the account was closed. 6 years from the time the information is changed or 6 years from the time the account was closed.